Today, I want to talk about why Games Workshop does what Games Workshop does. And to do that, I'm going to be talking about funnels. Very exciting. This has all come about because Games Workshop has announced that they are rebranding their paint line to Warhammer paints rather than Citadel paints. I've talked about paint bottles before, so you can check that video out if you want. It's quite a controversial subject, but it's cropped up in all of the comment sections of every post to do with the rebranding. So I thought today, let's take a quick look at why Games Workshop is working the way Games Workshop works. As I mentioned, in order to do this, I'm going to be talking about funnels, and to do that, I'm going to be using a Sharpie. This is a Sharpie, this is a Sharpie, and a piece of paper. It's going to be very exciting, trust me. What is Games Workshop's game plan? And to do this, we need to look at a few things in this funnel. So Games Workshop is in the miniatures hobby. Now this is slightly different to if we look at historical wargaming, because they tend to work on their own systems. But most people, if they've worked in marketing, whether that be digital or traditional, or possibly user interfaces and other various things that involve having people arrive at a website or business and transition through something, know about funnels quite a bit. So the traditional one is a funnel that shows you accumulating people working down the funnel through the purchasing process and then either splitting them out the bottom into a new funnel or circling back to the top. And although this isn't quite the same, we can do something a little bit similar for how Games Workshop works in the miniatures hobby. Now my drawing is going to be awful, especially at this angle. So if we look at the miniatures hobby as a whole, you have a wide pool of people who might be interested. And we're just going to go down a little bit like that. And a very bad angle for me, but this is Games Workshop basically. So we'll call these new hobbyists. And that really is what Games Workshop is focused on. And there's a reason for that that will become apparent, and you can probably already see it from the poorly drawn shape that I've done here. So people find the hobby by all sorts of various routes, and nowadays those routes are becoming even broader. Computer games, movies, TV shows, and the internet as a whole. So what Games Workshop gets is the new hobbyists. And this may be different in some areas, but Games Workshop is admittedly the biggest and most well-known company, and they have put a huge amount of effort over the years into building up being recognized by people who aren't even in the hobby. Their marketing now includes soft toys, plushies, computer games, TV shows are on their way through Amazon. So there's going to be a whole bunch of new hobbyists or people who are interested in finding out more about the miniatures hobby. And Games Workshop admittedly is best placed to capture these people. Their IP, although fairly unique, having drawn on so many influences, is quite recognizable. They also offer fantasy and sci-fi, as well as a bunch of smaller games, all designed to get new people to give it a go. And that's where many of the controversies also sit. Things like the paint pots. Why do they use these paint pots rather than dropper bottles? It's simply because for a brand new person into the hobby, the paint pot is quite a bit easier than a dropper bottle. They don't need anything else. See, for a brand new hobbyist, you can flick that lid open. It's got the little ridge inside the bit that flips open, and you can just dip your paintbrush straight in and put it straight on your model. Is this for everyone? Well, as I said, I've done a video on the pros and cons of pots versus dropper bottles, but it is a very simple way to start, and that is what Games Workshop is aiming for at the top here. Simple but recognizable as Warhammer, because they want to try and keep you in this section. Everything they do is designed to make it easy for new hobbyists to get into the hobby and to be using Warhammer branded products, to fully immerse yourself in the Warhammer hobby. Not necessarily the miniatures hobby, but the Warhammer hobby. And as you can see, it already tapers down, because Games Workshop is quite a big company, as you may have noticed, and hobbyists tend to go on the journey. So down here is more experienced people, up here new people. Down here you may be more of a tournament player, up here you've just bought some miniatures and you just think they look cool because you saw them on a shelf, or you looked into it a little bit after you were playing Space Marine 2 on your PlayStation 5, for example, and you wanted some of these boys in blues to sit on your shelf. This is Games Workshop's whole idea, as simple and easy and as broad as possible, to get new people into the hobby, specifically into their part of the hobby, and they would like to keep you here. So they do offer high quality products like their miniatures, because they want to keep you here. They do keep investing in higher quality miniatures. They do keep bringing out new models because they want you to come in here and stay in here. You may move around within, but as we all know, as you move down to the bottom of the funnel, you get more of an idea. You start looking out at what else there is, and so you might then move on to something else. We draw another bit. You may find, as many people have, that Games Workshop's rule system may not be the best, and it's at this point that you begin filtering down from Games Workshop into whatever it is that you are more interested in. So you might want a higher variety of miniatures, in which case you're going to go and pick up some other miniatures from some other companies, maybe Conquest, maybe Moonstone. There are loads and loads and loads of other companies, and 3D prints, that should be another thing. So if you're just interested in the models, you might come down this side of it from Games Workshop. You may still stay with Games Workshop as well, but you will slowly fall down the funnel of discovering other companies. Also, their rules aren't the best, as mentioned. So you might go to something like War Machine, who are famed for having a much tighter rule set. However, as we know, with tighter rule sets comes more interest usually in tournament play. So this may not be for everyone. I like War Machine. I'm more in it for the models in the background, so actually War Machine for me comes over this side. You can then go even further down this funnel. I'm doing it very simply. There's a whole bunch of stages that you can go through, but then maybe you decide that miniatures are very expensive. You want to explore 3D printing. You want to start getting dropper bottles. You want to start airbrushing. So as you can see, Games Workshop isn't interested in these, because there's a much smaller pool of people. Because what I haven't mentioned is all down the sides of these are holes in the funnel, and out of these holes people fall out of the hobby at various points, at various times, for various reasons. So you have Games Workshop right at the top with a very wide net, a huge opening, trying to suck in as many people as they possibly can, knowing that quite a large percentage of these people will probably exit the hobby. Now, you can argue whether that's partly Games Workshop's fault, or is it just life circumstances, the hobby's not for them? I would argue that there's not a 50-50 mix, I don't think that, but there is a mix of the two. Games Workshop's higher prices will obviously force some people out, but there is also a whole bunch of other reasons why you may have experimented in the hobby, come in and then left. And generally that can happen with any hobby. So Games Workshop's products are always designed to reach the largest market. They do burrow down into a more niche side of things a little bit by having competitive rule sets, tournaments, events, more complex painting methods shown on their painting YouTube. Generally, they want new hobbyists, and then hopefully a fraction of those will stay with them. But they also know they're not for everybody. They are aiming for the new hobbyist, they are aiming for then people to stay with them, but they know that they don't offer everything quite as niche down as what some people want, usually as their hobby journey continues and they start looking outwards from Games Workshop, which is why you then have kind of these sections here. And it can continue, it can get nicher and nicher and nicher until you don't have hardly anyone else doing what you're interested in. Games Workshop knows what new painters want, what casual painters want, and they focus on this area. They focus on providing extraordinary models in order to get people to come into the hobby, be able to put some paint on them easily, and then hopefully stay as their skills improve, but know that they will then dip into other parts of the hobby. So you don't have to be here and not be able to be here. It is just that you will most likely start here and move down while still retaining an interest in whatever you've passed. I hope that gives some idea as to why Games Workshop does what they do. It doesn't cover why they do everything that they do, but with the recent release of the paints being done under the Warhammer brand rather than the Citadel brand, I hope that it kind of plants the seed in your mind as to why they might want everything under just the one Warhammer brand rather than multiple brands doing different products. But I hope it gives a bit of framework as to the thinking, as I can see it anyway, as to why Games Workshop does the various things that they do. And it's not that they only care about new hobbyists, but that is a significant source of income, and so they are casting a broad net with the idea that they can keep you in the hobby, but they know that a huge number of people are going to leave, and they know that a huge number of people are also going to filter down into looking deeper into the hobby. But Games Workshop Warhammer products, for most people, will tend to be the entranceway into the miniature hobby, and so they try to capture as many of those people as they can. I know this is going to be quite a divisive subject and people are going to have lots of opinions on it, but please share them down below and let us all know your thoughts on it, but keep it polite. Everyone's welcome to their opinion, and I'll catch you all in the next video.